know me, I'm Helene Granqvist. I'm the president of Women in Film and Television International. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to this last webinar for 2020. We started this actually in March. At the same time as COVID came, we started this series of webinar, and it has been a fantastic traveling around the world. We have certain WIFTI chapter who hosts these webinars, and today I'm super happy to tell you that WIFT Caucasus is hosting today's webinar. And our guest today is the amazing international location scout, Laurie Bolton. Applause. And this conversation will be moderated by Anna Zyapshipa from Georgia and from WIFT Caucasus. She's an artist and director. So enjoy this webinar, and please write your names and where you're from in the chat field, and put a lot of questions to Laurie in the Q&A field. After a while, Anna will open up for questions. So write your questions in the Q&A box. See you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen. And hi, everybody. Good evening, good morning. So we're different time zones. So I'm Anna Zyapshipa. I represent at this point WIFT Caucasus, and it's a second webinar I'm hosting actually, and I'm very, very happy to be part of it. And I'm very proud to present Laurie Bolton, who is a location scout and member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She's credited on more than 70 feature films, providing an expert eye for locations that conjures what was once only a scripted vision to a filmed reality. She had worked on various interesting films, and she will share her experience with us. Currently, she's based in Los Angeles, and we are very happy and honored she will share her experience, as I told you. So I encourage you to check her Instagram page, which reveals her experience and unique gaze of the world she captures. So when I was preparing this conversation, and one of my favorite terms came to my mind, it's flaneur, and we discussed with Laurie that term. It comes from the idea of wandering, of strolling in the streets, and generally flaneur was always considered to be a man. And there is an interesting article I encountered in Guardian recently, which I want to refer to. Small quote from the article. It's strange, for as long as there have been cities, there have been women living in them. Yet, if we want to know what it's like to walk thoughtfully in the city, there is only a long tradition of writing by men that tell us, stretching from Thomas de Quincey to André Breton to Will Self. But if we want to know how women experience the city, the flaneuse, if she can be said to exist, must be a streetwalker or a homeless woman. That is the small quote from the article. And if we speak about the similarity with location scouting, how it feels to be a female location scout, was it usual for women to be a location scouts when you started your professional career, Laurie? Thank you.
Well, I started working actually as a location manager, and then when I got pregnant, I switched over to scouting. That's another story. When I started location managing, I started with a female location manager who is still one of my best friends, Janice Pauly. We all kind of bonded together and helped each other a bit because it was mostly men doing the work. And when I'm out scouting on a movie, I'm generally with predominantly men. I mean, most frequently in a scout van, I'm the only woman. It never really bothered me or was really much of an issue for me because I grew up with 4 brothers. So I'm used to it. You know, it never really fazed me. And I guess I just never thought of myself in a way of any less qualified or any less deserving than a man. So maybe I've just been lucky, but it's never really been an issue for me.
So when
I would want to add, it is an issue with scouting when you're scouting in questionable areas, like if you're scouting in ghettos or slums or favelas. But I think that's a question of safety for whether you're male or female. But I think that there are some times where a woman might be at greater danger scouting in certain areas if she's by herself.
You mentioned location management and location scouting. Could you also speak about difference between these two professions and how they differ?
Absolutely. I think a location manager has hands down, maybe the director is a bit above that, one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult job on the set. They're responsible for absolutely everything from permitting to, contracts. If anything goes wrong, it's somehow always traceable back to the location manager, no matter what department it's in. And if anything goes right, there are 5 producers standing in line to take the credit. So it needs to be a certain person who's really good creatively, not only visually, but creatively with logistics, and a person who has a good sense of humor and great people skills. It's an extremely demanding job with a very high level of responsibility that very few people really understand, even within the industry.
You said the word demanding, and it's especially important for the women actually who combine work and family actually. And majority of our participants are women and mothers, and sometimes single mothers. And how does the industry support females working really hard and mothers when they're mothers and single mothers as well? What is your experience? How was it when you started, and how is it now, and how was it in your career?
I think that it's changing a little bit. One thing that I always try to do when I am in a van with a bunch of guys is I will talk about my kid and encourage them to talk about their kids. And I'm seeing that a lot more often. I think that it was almost seen as a sign of weakness when I first started working, that you would talk about your family because you're not driven, you're not focusing on the job. And I think people have realized that it's important to do both and have both, and that if you do have a good family life, it makes you in many ways a more solid, balanced person. So so there's that. Location managing, however, like producing, directing, it's demanding. It's a 24/7 job. So, if a big wind comes up and your tents blow over at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be getting the call to, either go out there yourself or find someone who's going to go and fix the problem, because the crew is coming in 2 hours and everything has to be up and running. So I found the part of the job that I really love is location scouting. And that's the other interesting thing about managing, is it's a right and left brain job as one. Most location managers do scout for their shows and then they manage them. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I decided to try to just be a location scout. And at that time, it was only being done by commercial scouts, not by features or TV people. And the first job that I had to turn down because I was pregnant was an Alan Pakula movie called The Pelican Brief. And I thought, okay, so I'm not going to work on A-list movies anymore, even though I just finally got here. But it's my decision to have a child, and I'll take a couple of steps back, and we'll see how it goes. And it was weird when I said I only scout. I think there was like this mystique around me all of a sudden, like, oh, if she only scouts, she must be really good. And then because I was only scouting, and I was only scouting in LA, I really did get to know every inch of the city, because it was all I would do every single day was go out and scout. And for scouting, it's demanding as well, but I know what I need to produce by the end of the week. And I'm very lucky that most of the people I work with leave me alone to do my job, because they know I'm going to do it as agreed. And so the hours are long, but they're my own. So I can, in other words, work an 18-hour day, because I can work at night once I put her to sleep, and that gives me time to see her in the Christmas pageant or whatever. So it gave me the ability to add some balance to my world, as opposed to just being at the beck and call of production. So I got really lucky being able to meld the two.
Yeah, that could be inspiration for many people as well. So besides being a mother, I think sometimes the industry requires also some age limits as well. And do you think that at some point the age could be an obstacle while working as a scout, or vice versa? Does the experience gained throughout the years support the career in the industry?
I think that it's a little bit of both for everybody, probably. But I've been very lucky that the latter is more true for me, that people seem to value the experience that I have to bring to a project. I have a pretty encyclopedic knowledge of locations, especially in Los Angeles and the States, but also now, as soon as my daughter went to college, I started working more internationally. So that's been really fun too. So I think, and I love researching, and I have pretty good research skills. So I think all of that stuff makes me very valuable. The older I get, theoretically, the wiser I get. But also with ageism, it's very physically demanding. So you have to keep in good physical condition because like I remember when I was scouting in Vietnam, we were scouting these steps up to some high shrine, and the steps were built so long ago that they were all uneven, the height, the depth,
Right.
and it was, and it was at a high altitude. I mean, it was killer. I thought I was going to die like 7 times going up. And I always use my camera as a crutch. Like I'll stop and pretend I'm taking pictures so I can pant and catch my breath. But it's, so remaining in good physical shape for any job in this industry is important because you're on your feet and you need to react and you work long hours.
Yes. You mentioned your several favorite places. So when we talked before the webinar, and maybe you will share which are your favorite scouting places and what makes them unique and special for you.
Well, one thing that I've been doing recently, which I absolutely adore, is I've been scouting for plate shots. And what that is something that gives me the ability really to scout anywhere in the world because I'm not bound to having to find a nearby airport or hotel for the crew. So for instance, when I was in Vietnam, we scouted up at the Chinese border in the north, and we were in places where there were not hotels and there were not, it was fascinating. I mean, it was such an incredible opportunity to see the part of the world that tourists don't even go to. And that was really great. Iceland is another place that I absolutely love. Iguazu Falls in Brazil were incredible. Peru is great. I mean, I'm so grateful to do the job that I do because basically I get paid to discover the world.
So it seems you were working when you were on a vacation probably as well. So there's researching different places just for fun.
Exactly. That's the other side of it is I can't turn it off,
Yeah.
So I am always taking pictures and I am always looking, and my husband even hates driving with me in the car because I'm always, like my neck is swiveling back and forth. I don't want to miss anything.
Even in Los Angeles, where you are based?
Oh, yeah. Because there's always something new to see. There's always a new building, or there's always a favorite building that's no longer there. And you sort of need to keep up on all that stuff.
I wish to explore Los Angeles together with you one day.
Anytime.
Yeah. So it's about technologies. You mentioned photo camera actually, but the technologies are developing quite rapidly everywhere. And how technologies change in professional scouting, and what equipment you were using and what equipment you are using now. There's a VR also that I've heard several location scouts are using. And does it make the work easier or more complicated with this technology?
Well, one thing that I got very concerned about, just how it would affect my job, was when COVID first started, and people were saying, "Well, you're not, they're not going to use location scouts anymore. They're going to have someone go in with this technology, and they're going to put down the camera, and the camera's going to do a scan, and it's going to show them the home." And at first, I was like, really, that kind of, and then I thought, that's never going to it's not going to happen for the kind of movies that I work on, because I don't just walk in and document the room. I read the script, and then I go and I walk through the location and I think about it and I shoot it for how I think the director is going to, how I think I can present it in the most effective way for the director to use it to tell her or his story. So it's not about just straight documentation. It's an interpretation almost of the location. And sometimes it's a question of focusing on small facets of a location to sort of get an evocative feel for what it is, as opposed to just a visual sense, if that makes sense.
And if we go through your Instagram page, we will observe the details that you are capturing. Actually, it's very interesting also, and also interesting to see this perspective, how familiar places are captured in your camera, and how your eyes perceive the world actually. And what would be your advice to scouts visiting unknown places and unknown territories? how do they have to work in that unknown places?
Well, it's kind of, the internet is a blessing and a curse, because if you know how to use it well, it can unlock all sorts of treasures, but it does that for everybody. And so often I have producers who, for instance, will use Google Earth, and they'll find something and they'll go, well, here, I found the location. Look, go to this address and this is it. And it's like, yeah, but you're not understanding that, you know, there's a hill here that you can't see, and this neighbor is insane, and this, you know, this house here has been torn down. I mean, sometimes I feel like you need to hire someone in the location department just to follow up on people's senseless leads, because they're producers and they want their leads followed up on. On the other hand, for me personally, it's an invaluable tool. And I will do, like, for instance, on the live action Little Mermaid that's shooting now, I scouted for months. I scouted all virtually. It was all internet research. And I used screen grabs, and I worked with film commissions and production services around the world, and put together a variety of presentations for the production designer and director. And then from that, they figured out where they were going to shoot. So it's an amazing tool.
Right. I see lots of globes on your background, and it comes to my mind that we are living in the epoch of this global warming and climate change, and probably it also affects your work. And how do you see that the global warming crisis in your work, how it is depicted in your work? Actually, probably there are some places you captured that they do not exist anymore.
Exactly. I mean, it's, you know, it's a very real and frightening thing. And I cannot be more delighted that we finally have a president in this country who understands science and believes in science, and hopefully will, you know, get back in the French Accord and do things that will help us slow it down if we possibly can. But, you know, there's, like, for instance, the story from Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, how they went all over trying to find snow. They couldn't find snow anywhere for that movie. It was the same thing happened with The Revenant. I think they ended up in Argentina for some snow at the end of it. And, you know, so there's stuff like that. There's also the extreme weather when you're out shooting. You know, there's hurricanes and there's horrible rainstorms and extremes of temperature, and it affects scouting. It affects the crew when they're out working. So it's, you know, it adds to the growing challenges.
Yes, exactly. Do you have the database of the places that you could suggest to the project director, or how it works actually? And or it's
that would be my one very strong word of advice for anyone who is starting in this business: to start with a plan for keeping all of your information stored in a way that makes good sense, understanding that you're going to expand upon it. Because I started working and I never stopped working, which is a good thing, but I never had the time to stop and organize everything. So I have all of my everything organized only by the movie that I worked on, because that's as far in the future as I ever seem to be able to get. So, like, when I just finished scouting on something called Being the Ricardos that Aaron Sorkin is directing. So I'll have all of those pictures and all of those notes in a file folder that says Being the Ricardos. So then I have to remember, you know, 10 years from now, what did I scout on that movie? I have a very bad system. And the older I get and the more I forget, I'm realizing how bad my system is, because it's kind of all in here.
Yeah. So the naming the files are very important.
Yes, the naming of the files and just having an overarching system is really critical. And, you know, would that I could have done that.
Yes. Could you also talk with us about the process? How do you work on particular projects? Do you work with the whole process, like starting from development till the end, or it's individual depending on the project?
The project is always different. Sometimes I work on things that are in development that never even get made. Sometimes I work on things that they're trying to figure out. You know, it used to be that I would just get a script and advise them where the locations were. Now it's mostly I get a script and I'm told, here are the places that have the incentives that we're interested in. So see which of these places can work better, that sort of thing. The incentives play rather heavily into it.
Right.
And then, you know, sometimes I'm hired by a location manager who's already working on something, who's lost a location. and can't spare anyone else in the department to go and scout. So I'm brought in to scout for something. Sometimes I'm on it from the very beginning, even before a director and production designer. Sometimes I'm on before the production designer working with the director. Sometimes they bring in, assistants who pick all of the low-hanging fruit and obvious choices. And then when they can't find it, then they bring me in for a week and they think I'm gonna, pull a rabbit out of my hat. Sometimes I'm lucky, sometimes I'm not. But so it's a variety of things. And I think that that's kind of fun because it's always different for me.
Right. Can you share your favorite projects and films that you worked? There are lots of them, but still.
I loved working on Seabiscuit, and I just recently watched the movie again, and it still holds up. But the reason that I loved it was very personal. My daughter was in 4th grade then, and here in the United States, that's the grade where you examine the state that you live in. And so I was scouting around spring break, and I never thought it would work out, but it did coincide with her spring break. And I drove the entire state of California, and she came as my assistant. And because I had so many holidays in there around Easter, I continued to work through everything, but we were able to stop at different places of interest for her. And she is now a horse trainer in Aiken, and she's been riding since she was 5. So for her to be with me scouting horses and horse farms on Seabiscuit, it was really a great thing. And then when we saw the preview of the movie, we walked out next to the jockey who was starring in the movie. And she at that time had wanted to be a jockey. And I whispered in her ear that she was already taller than the jockey was. But that was really a great time. Heat is also a favorite. Heat was full of testosterone, which oddly many of the movies that I've worked on are, but that one got so many great reviews that it was a love letter to Los Angeles, and the locations were really singled out in almost every review. So I was very proud of my work on that.
Great. So can you also speak to us about the role of education in location scouting job and profession, and what are the possibilities for location scouts to gain more information about this profession, and or is it a profession that one learns by doing it?
I certainly think that you can learn things, but I also think that you can do what I did, which was basically sort of learn by doing it. And in fact, Michael Mann on Heat was very instrumental to me, because he does not suffer fools. And so for instance, if he asked you a question, there was no way you could bullshit with the answer. I mean, you had to know. So I really, had a crash course in architecture, and I had I had to learn so much on that movie to stay ahead of him. It was not easy. And also there was a lot of night photography in that movie, which I didn't really know much about. So I learned about night photography in that movie. You have to be the kind of person who's inquisitive. You have to be the kind of person who has good people skills, and you have to be the kind of person who's not afraid of working hard. If you've got that and you can, land on your feet in any situation, then you can certainly be a good location scout.
Right. And this is your suggestion to the location scouts as well. And I think we can open up for the questions, because otherwise I could go on talking with you, but I know there are lots of questions coming to you. So I think we are ready to receive some questions from the audience as well. I think Regina will help me with that.
Yes, I'm just jumping in here. Also, hello to everybody from my side. I work with communication and membership within WIFTI, for those who don't know me yet, but I'll just be your ghost voice for the questions. So please bring them on for this next half an hour. We've got quite a few, and some are sort of on the profession of a location scout, and some are a bit more about you, Laurie, some curious folks. So I'll take the questions about the profession and how, technicalities around being a location scout first, maybe. And we have one question from Camilla from Colorado and New Mexico. And she wonders if there is a sort of, or if there are sort of assistant level jobs for location scouting, sort of to start off with, or if you if you aren't able to take on the entirety of the position at first, and maybe to learn if you know anything about assistant level jobs for location scouting.
Yeah, so it varies throughout the world because the union situation varies throughout the world. I work in Los Angeles, so I am, believe it or not, a Teamster. And I have been a proud Teamster for almost 30 years. In the Teamster Union, we do not have location PAs. We have assistant location managers, and you have to get into the union at a time when somebody is vouching to get your name on the roster, and there aren't many other people who could be doing that job that you're being hired for. So it has to be pretty busy in order to get into the union in Los Angeles. And it's unfortunate because as much luck is involved there as skill. So that's unfortunate. There are some states that are right to work states where there are no unions. So someone could hire you to be a location manager if they wanted to. There are other states like Georgia that has a new union that you can go into the union office and you can get into the union because it's such a new industry there. And maybe befriend somebody who's the manager who will hire you as an assistant and kind of show you the ropes. I would suggest if you haven't worked in the film business at all, working as a production assistant on something and seeing how every department functions and watching how every department interacts with the location department. That's kind of important. Again, distinguish between whether you want to be a location manager or a location scout. And commercials also are a good place for location scouts to work as well, because there are more people who work only as scouts on commercials. And then the unions on the East Coast are DGA, and then the unions in Chicago and some other countries are IA, the Union for Location Managers. So DGA, IA, non-union, and Teamster, and that's just in the United States. So in Canada, there's a DGC, so it really varies all over. So years ago, 17 years ago actually, I joined with some friends and we started something called the Location Managers Guild, and you can find that at locationmanagers.org. And what that is, it's a guild that supersedes all unions, and it's kind of nice so that we can chat with each other and realize that we have colleagues that do what we do all over the world. And if you're interested in possibly getting into the career, if you look at that website, you could read back issues of our Compass magazine, which I was the editor of, and you can learn more about the craft. And I feel that anyone that you talk to who does any job in this business really enjoys what they do. They have to, because we work such long hours. If you catch them at the right time, almost anyone will be willing to talk to you about what they do and how they do it. And so if you could find someone locally where you are and convince them that you're a smart person who's willing to work, you will find a mentor and they will help you, get your foot in the door. And once your foot is in the door, then it's up to you to keep moving forward.
That's great. Thank you, Laurie, for that answer. And that maybe answers Diana's question, because she was asking about unions for Location Scout. And she was saying that she's scouting in Louisiana, but she finds it quite hard to get on a set when she doesn't have credentials. I don't know if you want to comment quickly on that, maybe on that particular issue to make a start to get on sets before you have any credentials.
Well, you've got to, when I started working as a production assistant, I had a master's degree, and one of my first jobs I worked on was actually craft service on a non-union movie. And craft service, I don't know if you guys know, basically you're hired to bring hot things when it's cold, cold things when it's hot, make sure that there's snacks for the crew to eat. And it took me a long time to sort of get a Zen approach toward it and realize they're paying me to keep people happy, to make sure that everybody is fed and can concentrate on their work. And I remember quite distinctly one day, someone came up to the table and remarked on how nicely I had cut a coffee cake. And I wanted to take the knife and go, I have a master's degree. I can do things other than cut a fucking, pardon my language, coffee cake. And I didn't. I just, I bit my tongue and I said, can I get you a cup of coffee to go with that? And that's, in a nutshell, that is what you have to do. You have to get, no matter how, I can't tell you how many cigarette butts I've picked up and how many toilet bowls I've cleaned in doing my job. I mean, you have to get in any way you can get in. And as I said, check out the locationmanagers.org and find somebody in Louisiana who's a location manager and convince them that you're worth it for them to spend some time with you. And if they're doing something that's non-union, maybe you can shadow them. It's very hard now with liability to intern for anyone. And that's really unfortunate because that as an option is off the table. But I think that if you can prove to someone that you're worth it, you'll eventually find someone who'll take a chance on you.
Thank you, Laurie, for that. So it's really good advice. And KT is wondering what skills you need to develop before becoming a location scout. Is it mainly photographer, or do you have any other advice on that, on skills?
My photography definitely improved as I was doing it. In fact, quite a deal, good deal, because I was just looking at some old pictures and I was like, whoa, these are a little rough. So researching, again, curiosity, being inquisitive, having good people skills, don't forget, you knock on someone's door, right? The person opens the door, they know nothing. And when I say nothing, they have no idea at all about filming, period. So you have like 2 seconds to convince them that you're a legitimate, solid citizen, that you're not there to rob their house, that you're not there running some scam, that you really are who you say you are, that this is how movies work, and this is how we'd like to work in your house, considering your house for location. You have 2 seconds before they slam the door in your face and say not interested. So it's your personality, really. If you have to have the right personality for the job. That's really what it all comes down to. If you have the right personality, you're inquisitive, you're good with people, and you work hard, the rest of the stuff you could learn.
Great, thank you for that. Anna, do you want to jump in real quick?
Yes, I was wondering how much does your network build up as a location scout? You probably have lots of people to whom you return for looking for the places or houses or whatever. Do you have a huge network of those people?
I work closely with film commissions, and actually that's a good idea for the gal in Louisiana who was saying, how do I get in? Why don't you try the Louisiana Film Commission and see if maybe they can take an intern and you can help them with their location database, and that can teach you about locations. And maybe they will then introduce you to some of the location professionals that work in the state by saying, so-and-so has been an intern in the film office for so long, and she's really smart and she's great with people, and I think she'd make a great assistant. Can you help her? So that's definitely another possibility. So I work with film commissions very closely, and also internationally, I work with production service companies. And there's so many great ones around the world, and I've become great friends with a lot of people. And it's not an option in Louisiana, but in other countries, that's another possibility, is to get a job with a location service company.
Great, thanks for that. And Sarab is wondering, once you've been hired and know what you have to look for, how and where do you start, especially if you're in an unknown location, for a foreign film? Or do you talk to people as part of the research? What's your approach to that?
I first do my own research with Google Earth and Google Image, after talking to the production designer to see what he or she is really after for the emotions that they want to have the locations elicit from the viewers. So it's not a question of maybe the scene takes place on a beach. So if I just read beach and called the film commission and said, I need to see all of your beaches, that may not do it for me, because you want to talk to the production designer and then you find out, well, it's not really a beach. It was the idea of a wide open space and the sense of a big sky. So all of a sudden, then that says to me, well, maybe it can be a field, or maybe it can be a dry lake bed, or maybe it could be a desert. So I like thinking outside of the box, but you also have to be careful that you're working for people who want you to think outside of the box, and just how far outside of the box they want you to go. I'll present a couple of images to them and see if I'm on the right track, and then I'll go from there. But what I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. So before I start working with a location service, a production service, or a film commission, I like to have some images as prototypes that I could say, this is the sort of thing that I'm looking for. And then the other thing that you need to be careful with is a lot of people will try to sell you what they have, even if they know that it's not what you're looking for, because they figure, well, maybe she'll find something here. We really want to be in this movie. So you have to be able to sort of weave your way politically, weave your way through the wheat and the chaff, and come up with what the right thing is for your production.
Can I jump in?
Of course, Anna, please go.
Besides the film director, it seems there is a sets designer with whom you collaborate quite actively during the production, or there are some other key crew members with whom you are actively collaborating while choosing the locations? How it works on a set?
I come on early enough that I am just collaborating with the production designer and the director generally. Or if I'm coming in when they're already shooting and the location manager has hired me, then I collaborate with the location manager, because the production designer is busy doing a million other things. So it kind of depends a little bit. But usually by the time they start shooting, I'm gone. There are exceptions. On Heat, Michael Mann kept me scouting literally until the last day of filming, because he wanted to be sure there were no other better locations were going to pop up. And then also because I also have worked as a location manager, whenever there were any emergencies, I would jump in and help with location management as well. So it depends.
Great, thanks for that. And somebody else is wondering, what are related fields of professions for location scouting or location scouts?
I'm not quite sure I follow that.
I guess like other professions that sort of connect with being a location scout that you can sort of do at the same time, or if you can't work on a film set, if there's anything related to the work of a location scout. That makes sense.
I did scout for a couple of video games, which was kind of interesting, but for me personally, not as rewarding. The thing that I love so much about scouting for films is that the locations to me are a character, and they're a tool to help the director tell her or his story. So the video games, it was sort of you can go this way and this happens, you can go this way and this happens, that sort of thing. So it was just another element, to build the game on, as opposed to being a character telling a story, if that makes sense. It's really, for me, it's just features, television and features now are really starting to blend, and commercials. I don't do that many commercials, only because I'm almost always working on features and TV, but as far as translating, I mean, into other things, I don't really do anything else, so I can't really answer that question.
Thank you. That's also a good answer. And we have a few people wondering, about more sort of slightly personal things. And Siako wonders, what is your secret to convince the director with the location you're presenting?
It came with doing it for a long period of time, but I finally got confident enough in myself to I guess just have a level of confidence. And I remember, I wish I could remember exactly what it was I was scouting, but I was working for Michael Bay, and he wanted something, white. I don't know what exactly it was that he was asking for, but it had to be white, let's say. So I'm looking, white, white. And no, this is wrong, no. And I'm literally looking for weeks and weeks. And finally I find something black. Whatever it was the direct opposite of what he had asked me to find. And I go and I show him the pictures and he looks at them and he says, this is exactly what I fucking asked you for. Why did it take so long? And I said to him, and I think most people would not have responded to that. They just would have said, thanks, that's great. I said to him, that is not what you asked me to find. You asked me to find the opposite of that. I thought that maybe this was what you meant. And he just laughed, you know? And so that's the thing. You're out there, like they'll ask you for something, but they don't know what's out there. And so you've read the story and you've talked to them about the character development and the whole thing. And so when you go out there, it may not be exactly what they ask for. It may be something that's just a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, but it feels right to you. And so you take a chance on it. And again, I think it's just taking your job seriously and being passionate about it. And I think that any director in their right mind would be grateful to have somebody working for them who is as passionate as they are about the project that they're working on. So again, it comes with time, it comes with experience, but it comes with believing that you know, over the years of doing what you've been doing, you've developed some sort of a sense of what can work and what won't work. And there are many times that, you know, I'll introduce things and they'll just look at me like, no, not going to happen. And I get it, you know, but every once in a while I'll hit it and they all look at me like I'm a genius. And it's like, you should see all the times they told me no. But I think just, you know, believing in yourself enough to know that you have a voice in the process, that you're part of the creative team and you're not just somebody who's there to get a paycheck.
Anna, do you want to jump in?
Yes, please. Thank you. So there are some current projects we're working on right now. And another question, how many projects do you work simultaneously on? Is it possible to work on several projects simultaneously as a location scout?
Oh, I tried that once and I will never, ever, ever do it again. And that to me is a big bugaboo in this business. There are a lot of people who double dip. And to me, if you're working on two jobs at once, you're only doing a half-assed job on each of them. And I will never do it again. I had, you know, a director begging me to come on and the other director was willing to share me. And it was not a good thing. I worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and I still felt like I was letting them both down. So I finish a project and then I start another one. And I'm just finishing now a project that Aaron Sorkin wrote and then we'll be directing about Lucy and Desi called Being the Ricardos. And I am starting on something called Fever, which is the story of the singer Peggy Lee.
Thanks for that. And we have one question from Miranda, and she's wondering if you've ever thought about making your own films.
No, I would be a horrible director. I really have a problem delegating. And to be a good director, you have to really put together a great team and trust them and be able to delegate and know that they're going to do the work. And I don't think that I have such a big vision. I think that I'm much better suited to help somebody else achieve their vision. That's it.
Super lovely. Yeah, thanks for that. Anna, do you want to jump in?
I have one question about the communications because you spoke a lot about the skills of communication and convincing. And I have a question. Do you also speak any other languages besides English? And how knowing the languages, for example, help you as a location scout while you're traveling and while you are being, English is international language and lots of people know that, but well, knowing the languages as a communication skill, how it is in that.
I do always try to pick up as much language wherever I go. I have a good ear for languages. I speak Spanish. Not 100% fluently, but well enough to get by. And as I said, I will learn things, as I go, but I need to, that's why I work with production service companies as well, because I need somebody to be with me who can translate.
So you work with the fixers when you're in different countries?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Great. We have a couple of more questions, and yeah, one comes from Camilla also. It just came in, and she's wondering how many days a year are you traveling actually?
Well, this year with COVID, I actually have been to Malta and I've been to Georgia. So even with COVID, I was lucky enough to get some traveling in. There was one year where I was home maybe 30 days. So it can be very difficult. People think that it's very glamorous to be traveling all the time. It's actually really exhausting. And while I love doing it, it's kind of nice to have a balance. So it's nice to work in LA on occasion. Yeah. When I was working on Jack Ryan, I scouted in Montreal, Rome, Paris, and Morocco. And it was like being in a blender. I mean, I had no idea. Some days I'd wake up and I really would have no idea where I was.
Wow.
One more question, if I may jump in again, Regina.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, you mentioned you are based in Los Angeles and you know the city by heart. And it's also interesting how the gentrification changes city and how it's yeah, probably there are some places like really that they're not possible to reach or they're just gone, or how much the city changed while you were living there.
Well, it's not only a question of gentrification, it's a question of modernization. And I was working on a movie called Babylon that got put on hold because of the pandemic, which was, it's the Damien Chazelle who directed La La Land. It's about Hollywood when it switched over from silent films to talkies and the actors who had difficulty making that transition. So I was scouting for very early Los Angeles, and it was very difficult to find locations, that hadn't been so modernized that they were worthless. And it's similar to gentrification when I'm invited a lot on something called familiarization trips, where different cities around the world, different countries sometimes will invite a few location scouts and managers to come and see their region, to hopefully have us know about it and tell directors so that a film comes there. And it's really interesting because almost all of them are very hesitant to show us their favelas and slums. And we love to see those gritty, dense, dark alleys. We love that stuff because that to us is part of, the underbelly is as much a part of a city as the shiny stuff that you see on top. So it's disturbing to see all of that stuff be cleaned up. But I think it's human nature and it's always going to exist somewhere.
Thank you for that. What was the best country you have filmed in, or were filming? Yeah, were scouting in, I suppose.
There is no best country. They're all wonderful. Everything has its own unique gems. I will say though that when I was scouting on Jungle Cruise, to be following the Amazon River and to be doing this because it's my job. I mean, and they're paying me to have this guy row me in a boat down the Amazon River in Brazil, and then to go, to travel to the headwaters where, all of the different places where the theory is that the Amazon has started in the mountains. I mean, it's fascinating. So there is no favorite country. I love them all.
That's superb. Love that answer. And we have one question from our very own Helen. And she's saying, like, yeah, you've been around for a while in the industry, and do you see any changes? Do you observe any changes in this industry, both good or bad?
Well, I certainly see more acceptance. When I worked on what was the name of it? A Wrinkle in Time that Ava DuVernay directed. I remember walking into the production office and thinking, something's different in here. What is going on? And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, everyone is Black. And I thought, this is great because there are so few people who are Black who work in this profession. And I loved working with Ava. I loved that she went out of her way to find people who were perfectly competent and wonderful at their job and had a different skin color. So I feel that the industry is starting to make strides towards being more accepting of people, of, you know, Black, white, brown, gay. I think it's women. I think it's getting just more accepting. There's more tolerance, and I hope that that's a trend that continues. Then the other thing that I find very disturbing, because I have a mortgage to pay, is that these blockbuster movies are just getting stupider and stupider by the second, and they're doing remakes of remakes of remakes. And the movies that are good movies are the independent films that don't have any budgets and can't really pay people who've been doing it for 30 years to come on, you know? So I work on as many of those as I can, with the caveat that I can help you out until a job that pays my rate comes along, but I can't really afford to, you know, make a really long time commitment, because I feel horrible to even say it, but there's just not enough money for me to continue living on if I work on those movies. But those are the movies that are, I think, the better movies. And it's interesting also, this whole trend of how television, I think, has greatly eclipsed feature films. I think that there's much better stuff on TV right now internationally than there is in the theater, if theaters were even open right now. So that's been a really interesting trend to keep watching.
You mentioned television. Have you ever worked on a series?
I worked on Jack Ryan, and I was shocked when you know, I mean, to me, I was treated as if I was working on a feature film. You know, my deal is that I fly business class, and my rate is my rate, and they paid my rate and flew me business class, and it was fine. It was great. It's a great experience.
Superb. Thank you. And I think before we sort of slowly will wrap up, there's just a couple of quick questions from a few people. And Diana is wondering, I think you mentioned a certain website before for locations. What was that again? Diana is wondering. I think it's Locations or Location Scouts.
I'm so sorry. I was zoning out reading the chat comments, and I did not listen to the bad.
No problem. Yeah, of course, it's no problem. Diana is wondering, I think you've mentioned a website during the chat before about a website for locations.
Yeah, it's Location Managers plural.org, and Location Managers as one word. And that's the website for the LMGI, which is the Location Managers Guild International.
Perfect. That was that one. I think we'll soon invite Helene back. Is there anything, Anna, you would like to ask or bring in or comment on? And then...
No, I just want to thank Laurie. I just sent to the attendees the link to the Laurie's Instagram page, which I find really amazing and interesting insight to her work. And I want to thank Laurie for this amazing, inspirational talk about exploring different places and exploring her profession, which is amazing and very interesting. And thank you for that.
Hello.
I would just like to add, I have had people help me along my way. I did not know anybody in the industry when I started, and yet here I am. So I encourage you all to reach out to people. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook, and my email address is laurie@lauriebolton.com. And if any of you have any questions and I can help you out, I'm happy to help you out if I have the time. It may take me a while, but I do try to respond to emails that I get. So good luck to y'all, and I hope some of what I said made some sense to you.
That's lovely. Actually, I have one question now when I jump in. Can you see a difference in the way women and men work, producers, directors, production.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Could you just share just in general, could just be interesting to hear, I think.
It's why I think women make much better location managers and location scouts, because we're nurturers. I mean, and I can't tell you how many times I've been out with a whole group of people and we're standing in the sun, and I'll reach into my pocket, and maybe it's because I started in the business doing craft service, but I'll reach into my pocket and pull out a tube of sunscreen and walk around and give it to each of these idiot men and go, the back of your neck is turning bright red. You might want to put some of this on. And nobody has ever been like, you know, they're all like, oh, thank you. You know, like I'm their mother or their aunt or whatever. But I just think that, there's just more humanity in women.
Because I thought of that when you, sorry, but when you shared and said, I'm here to help you, and because I had planned to say this question, and then you offered, if anyone needs me, I'm here for you. So I think, isn't that also that you have an open mind to be there for other people?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think, you know, I don't know. And I think that just we can multitask so much better than men as well. I think that that's a really big secret to our success.
Fantastic to have you here, Laurie, and fantastic to have this hosted by you, Anna, and WIFT Caucasus. So for all of you who love our webinars, which I hope what you do, we will have a post in January, but from February 3rd, and then every Wednesday, we will have a big collaboration with WIFT Washington and the 5 Nordic embassies. And we will have film screenings, Q&As with filmmakers, and panel discussions with both Nordic and American filmmakers. So watch out, sign up for our newsletter if you haven't done already. It's on wifti.net. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and a lots of love. And let's hope that 2021 will be a little bit easier for us. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
Bye.